So thanks so much for joining us again throughout the years. But today, I'm joined by our Chief Geek, John Michelson, our Product Chief, Chris Kraus, and I'm self-proclaimed Chief Marketer from last time. So we're going to talk about why DevOps stops. So in this session, we invited release managers, software development folks, testing folks, anybody that's in charge of delivering new features in your applications, new software, because we're always looking for more efficient ways to do that, right? So the theory behind the session is, if we have all of these automation tools, why is DevOps still so manual? Why do we have swivel chairs and multiple screens and multiple tools? So what we want to show you a little bit about today is, why that happens and maybe something that you could do about it in terms of how do you take, your people and your systems and how do you make them work a little bit better together? So Chris, any opening comments, and then I'll hand it back over to you, John, see if you want to say anything before we get started.
No, and I think it's very accurate because I know we live this as software developers, and we see it with our customers also, how the swivel chair, and it's like, great, I've got a million tools, but it never is perfect. We're always striving for better DevOps, right? And so this is something we live, so it's something we enjoy with our customers also.
Yeah, Chris, you're absolutely right. We do live this ourselves. We have 40 plus tools in our tool chain, and no one vendor has any more than a handful of them. So there's been a real disintegration of the dev tool chain over the last several years, and that doesn't look like it's going to change. So the challenge is, how can we put those things together in a way that doesn't require a massive development effort? Because decision makers and sponsors, they don't know those tools. They don't have access to those. You wouldn't give a login to most of those tools to the folks that write the checks, if you will, and determine the budgets and have a large say in whether things go or don't go. So how can we more effectively execute DevOps and lose those pauses? So Chris, I know you've got a lot queued up for us, so we should get started.
Cool. So if you think about DevOps, it's improving, but we also say it's a journey. So the concept of the figure eight or infinite loop for dev and ops working together, it's been around a long time. But the problem is it's been around a long time, but everything behind it keeps expanding. And there's a really interesting piece of research out there, the DevOps report, or State of DevOps. And if you look in 2020 and 2019, you'll find some interesting statistics. And what they did is, because this is maturing, they said they've come up with a maturity model. Like, we start with normalization, then standardization, which is probably where a lot of us are. Then how do we expand this enterprise level, get completely automated with infrastructure delivery to self-service, where we want to be. But what we find in the research is that many of these initiatives, culture slow or stop between stages 2 and 3. It's really hard to get past that, to get past standardization to expansion and scaling. And one of the problems is people have to get across there, right? And so it's like getting across the neutral zone. So many times the research is showing that we lack scale when we expand across the organization. We're good at normalizing what are our favorite tools. We're good at standardizing, getting everybody to use them. But how do we expand that across the enterprise, past our team itself? So people and approval.
Yeah, Chris, on the previous one, in between 2 and 3, if you read some of the Gartner research, they also say that's where you get stuck. So I know this was from State of DevOps report, but Gartner says that 3 out of 4 of all the projects, they fail right here, because when you go from standardization to expansion, basically when you go from team to team, yep, is when it breaks down, right? Because it's really easy to automate inside your own business unit or inside your own application, but once you expand out of there, that's where it breaks down. So hopefully our audience will learn a little bit about that today.
Yep. Cool. So one thing you specifically brought out was the change management process. So orthodox change management. And I know in highly regulated industries, I've been parts of organizations where you have the monthly push. So once a month, we get to push our changes into production. So there's a change review board. Those people come in, they get a pre-read the night before, they go through the process of approving, and they look at everything from your use cases, have people betaed the software, have people tested it, and there's very specific windows in which we release new versions of software. Well, what we're finding is people with these really restrictive, highly orthodox ways are not very effective at actually pushing out new software. Their DevOps maturity is pretty low. So it's actually down like around the 9%. People find that these approvals and change management process is not as efficient as it could be. Firms with these low orthodox approvals are 9 times more efficient than firms with high orthodox approvals. So what does that mean? It means they're not skipping the approval process, they're just taking a different approach to that. So how can you be more efficient without dragging too much process into there? You still need all your audits and your touch points in that. But what they found is firms with high involvement of the employees in the change management process are 5 times as likely to have highly effective change management than firms with low employee involvement. So it seems like a catch-22. The orthodox way is get a whole bunch of people in a room once a month and they all look at this. But on the other side, they're saying that's not very effective, and you're gated by time and getting those people together. But this seems the opposite or counterintuitive, because they're saying, oh, by the way, people are very effective, actually have lots of people involved in the process. So that means they must be doing something differently if they're getting lots of people together to agree on how to make this work. So it's interesting. It seems like left hand and right hand both have lots of people. So what's the problem? So, well, quite honestly, it's probably the process. How are they approaching this to solve for this? So if you think about this, we start out with normalization and standardization. So the first 2 stages, those are pretty easy. But what we need to do is we need to figure out a different approach to include people in the process. And so people and the technology need to work together to be able to scale these deployments. It shouldn't be throw it over the wall. It shouldn't be, hey, go to yet another application. If you just alt tab to these 7 things and look at it, you'll figure out what's going on. The problem is we're trying to say, hey, people, you just need more technology. You need to do more alt tabs to figure out what's going on. It's all there, you just have to figure it out. That's probably not a good approach. And so what we find is conversation is a very natural way for people to communicate, but it's not a natural way for people to communicate with their computer systems. So at Krista, we feel that is actually the key. So if you think about, of course, that cool thing, Star Trek. In Star Trek, you have a conversation with people, you have a conversation with computers, you have conversations with androids. Everybody's speaking the same language, and therefore there's no distinguishing or gating factors of how you communicate and get information. So we need to think about changing how we do that. And so I'll explain to you how with Krista we'll help you do that. We want to change the way you communicate and interact with automated processes and humans to help get across stages 2 to 3 and then get from 4 to 5. So we feel there's actually a good way to evolve. This model is going to work, but we have to change the way we communicate. So of course, there's Nirvana. Everybody loves this subway map. It's got everything on here. It's got every deployment platform. It's got every app server, every testing tool, every hypervisor. But in reality, you don't have all these, right? This is Nirvana. We have all of these. And guess what? Everything is perfectly interchangeable because of standardized logic. We use standard SQL, things like that. We can use multiple databases. Well, of course, this isn't how you get there. And yeah, it is Nirvana, but it's not how it actually works. So how is it really working? Well, we start out with the low-hanging fruit. As Scott mentioned earlier, when people are on the same teams, think like GitLab, Get, and then you've got Cruise Control, Travis, Hudson, Jenkins. Okay, developers tend to be checking in their code, and they tend to be tightly correlated to the build process. So that's within one team. They're going to get those 2 things to work together. But the database administrator team, they have nothing to do with that. They're just looking at what's my DDL, what's my DML, and how am I going to scale this, right? And then you've got another team, usually infrastructure. They may have some on-premise, they may have things in the cloud, another team. And then you've got the infrastructure team that deploys all the app servers and scales them and secures them. So in reality, when we talk about deploying this, a lot of people are having to work together. This is very cross-functional team. Database teams, security teams, infrastructure teams, development teams have to work together. And how do we do it? In a Zoom, like everything else right now. We all get on a call and we say, okay, I've done my part. You need to do your part. Have you done your part? You know, we're not communicating between the software and the people very effectively. So what do we want to do? Okay, let's realize that no one's going to have a complete map. It's a journey. You're starting down this. People start with a couple legs that are not connected, and the way they're connecting them is through people and actually, you know, messaging and emails and phone calls and things like that. And let's realize some of these processes may never be automated. Some of them may be automated, which is fine. You know, DevOps doesn't require everything to be automated. We just want it to be as seamless as possible with high visibility. And then humans in the middle for handshaking or complete the process is going to be a natural progression for you. So even if your goal is 100% automation, to get there, you're going to have to interact with people. Part of it is the trust. You know, do you really trust that this system's going to work? No, people want to understand what's happening and they build trust along the way. Of course, so Chris has always asked, let me know if there's anything else. So if we talk back to the today world, what are people doing? They're all tabbing between apps. They say industry-wide, people have about 50 business apps they work on their desktops. Some of them could be multiple apps in a browser. Sometimes they're thick clients. And they do 1,100 thousands of app switches a day between them. I mean, if I thought about just simplifying this DevOps, I've got a build server, I've got pipelines, I've got JSON documents come out, I've got Jenkins reports, I've got, you know, chat windows, I've got Slack, I've got test results. I've got a lot of different tools out here which are doing great things, but they're probably not integrated well. I'm having to alt tab between them and then have to look at different things. And sometimes, you know, some people are not mortals and they can remember all their URLs and how to get to them. Others are like, oh my gosh, how do I get to that? Where was that release for? How do I find those test results? I can't remember how to get there. It's really a lot of work and it's not very helpful. We're forcing people to learn a lot of technologies versus having technology learning how people want to work. So that's the thing we want to shift. So think about that Star Trek Enterprise again. People are having conversations with technology, the computer system, the androids, and each other because we're all on the same language. We're not doing a good service to ourselves by adding just another tool to the desktop. We need to figure out how to make the tools work for the people. So how would you do that? Well, I'm going to suggest, obviously, we put Krista in the middle. So granted, you're going to start out where developers start out where they're closest to home. They've got they should do their check-ins, they've got their builds, and they're starting to get some rhythm there. Are we passing the builds, passing some unit tests? And then they have to work with the DBAs. Well, the DBA process usually isn't just an automated process as part of the build server. So what happens is we're going to suggest Krista monitors the build, detects when the DBA should be notified, and say, hey, build 59 has been put into the development environment. Have you loaded your schema? Have you loaded your databases? And you'll notice there's a little lock and a red timer. It sets a timer on that. So if there's one DBA, he'll get it done. If the DBA is out, it'll automatically escalate to the other persons on the team. So they're not getting stopped because you sent an email and that person was out of office, right? So one way we can prevent the stopping of this DevOps is by integrating them together with Krista via communication. Okay, I think that expands past there, okay? So one thing that we all strive for, and it was super cool, is, oh, I've got Chef. Now I'm gonna start building my recipes and start, cooking things up, right? And that's gonna let me correlate and do a lot more of these things automated. But in reality, it doesn't happen the first day. You still may have some communications between Chef sends some things to configure stuff, but it may have to ask, AWS or Azure to actually deploy the environment, and that may still be manual environment. That's fine. Chef needs to ask someone in infrastructure, what's my region name? What's the instance I should start pointing to? They can start doing its work to build cooking from its cookbooks and that. Same thing here. We want to interact computer processes with people to join them together so that there's no stopping because someone doesn't know what's happening. And then finally, we get to the point in which you've got all the more infrastructure there. And quite honestly, if you know me, you know I come from a long background of testing. There always seems to be a go, no go from the quality teams. They are very interested in understanding, okay, I've done my functional tests, I've done my load tests, the security teams are doing what they need to do. I need to have a go, no go, and I need to document that. So sometimes, even if you get things automated, you always want that human nod. Yes, I approve this, it goes forward. So we have that sign off there. Well, the hard thing is when you're doing this without any type of automation where you're connecting people and computer systems like we do with Krista, you don't have documentation of that. The advantage of using something like Krista is not only are we going to be able to monitor and say be event driven from computer systems, maybe you drive actions from Krista, but we're also going to log and audit all this. So we'll give you audit logs and reporting on what's happened. So if you need to understand, what did the last release look like? What did my last 6 months release look like? What stage am I in? When we're having conversations between people or having conversations with computer systems, we're logging all this in the background so you can audit it and get your reports. Nothing makes release managers and Sarbanes-Oxley separation of duties more happy than knowing that we've automated things, we've included people in the approval process, but we actually have an audit trail across what we've done.
Yeah, Chris, I'll just expand on this just for a second, because I'm sure that one of the common things we hear, and it's a good question or comment, is, well, I do a lot of the people work in Slack, and I have a couple of bots in Slack that allow me to go get data or kick things off. And of course, without more sophisticated tech, that's a great approach, right? It falls down in a few different ways. The first is the one that Chris just mentioned. There's no real linkage of the automated parts of the DevOps cycle and the human parts of the DevOps cycle. So everything that your automated tools are doing essentially is a black hole to the people, and it requires people action in order to continue to move the process forward. There are no automatic next steps. And that creates a problem, because what we really need to make this work is not one silo of collaboration tools for people and one set of automation tools for tech. What we need is orchestration of people and tech under one very simple to understand umbrella. And again, it gets to a point I made at the start of this particular webinar, that we as practitioners might know many of the tools within our sphere, and we don't need something in between us and those tools. I'm fine inside my IDE, I'm fine inside my change management tool, and I like my build screens, right? But my boss and my boss's boss don't even know what those things are called. And I swap them out without them even knowing. I grab a new build server because I like I'm searching in Git for stuff, and it ends up in our project before anybody even knows what's going on. So data exposed to others becomes very difficult. And that is not sufficiently solved with something like a Slack bot. Slack bots are certainly useful for going and getting certain activities to happen. But to go and create a comprehensive report, like for instance, when a project sponsor says, where are we with this particular release? And we say, I think we're great. Well, that's an emotional answer to a data request. That's not an appropriate answer. And there's no Slack bot for how are we with the release. That's actually a query into many different systems and depending on what state the particular project's in, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's this fact that we have a collaboration world for people and an automation world for software that are distinct and not connected. That is, I think, the fundamental problem that we need to solve, and that's where Krista lives.
Cool. So what does Krista look like to you? So Krista has a UI. It could be that you're messaging through SMS or WhatsApp and that. The core concept is conversations and processes are the same. Like a point of a conversation is to maybe inform you that something's happened, ask you a question, and then take an action. Maybe it's to update a system, kick something off, check the status of something, right? And then we want to make decisions. So the idea is we have conversations and processes around DevOps and HR management and all different areas in our business catalog. But there's some core things you want to do. You want people to interact with technology in a conversation in a way they're used to. Everybody, even small children know how to text, right? So even my mother is a master of texting, and she's in her 80s, right? So let's go with something simple. Have a conversation and think about there's 4 things we need to do. Inform people of information. Maybe Chris is monitoring and triggering. Maybe it's asking information and getting you a response. And then maybe it's updating systems so you can take actions. So the neat thing about technology and what's so exciting about this is we've decoupled the extensions and the information level. So you don't have to understand, oh, there's REST calls, there's Java calls, there's horrible things in the back end to get the data. It is simply a request for information, and that is decoupled. And so even a business person can draw out these processes. The technical hard bits at the bottom, where we're getting information, updating systems and all that, triggering actions, is actually handled by Krista as a platform itself. So 2 common scenarios we see. One is human in the middle. And so this is where, you're very early on in the DevOps process. How do we make sure that humans and processes are working together? And in reality, we want to learn to trust the automation. So what do? We trust but verify. We want to actually kind of be in the middle, sign off, make sure things are happening. So we learn to verify, and over time we get trust there. Change control needs to see history of success. What we really want to do is we want to automate people in a manual review, sign off, or et cetera, as it's just another step in a conversation, another step in a process. And then once you get farther down, so you get past level 2, and you're going to level 3, primary level 4 about automation. How do we get those higher levels of automation? Well, it's really about being notifications for your specific role. Don't tell me everything, just let me know about things I'm interested in, including of humans for very specific decisions when there's exception management, managed by exception versus a million messages. And then DevOps tools need to be included in the orchestration and people strategically, but let's bring them together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show 2 demos. This first one is where humans are very much in the process itself. We've got a release manager, and he's gonna ask for Krista to go kick off a build so we can review the status. And then he's gonna notify QA and InfoSec to say, hey, a new build has been deployed in your environment, unit tests look good. You need to have 2 hours. We're going to put a timer on that so you can get this and let us know. And the idea is we have escalation capabilities. So if someone's on vacation, you don't have to worry about them missing an email. These people can work together. We then get a go, no go decision. And then we'll decide, do we ask the VP, hey, we want to deploy this UAT. These are the facts. This is what we've done. These are our test results. These are the statuses of the tickets. This is the status of the build, which is very different than telling the VP, the build looks okay, we should deploy it, right? We'll have some material facts there. It's audited. You can see the history of the conversations itself. But the point is we're going to involve people and humans together. So through sleight of hand, I'll come over to Krista. So I've got a couple dashboards up here. They're kind of interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my conversations. I'm going to ask Krista to start web deploy. Start the web deploy build. Well, she figured out that that's actually a conversation called start builds, and I'll kick off the daily web app. Okay, so pretty simple. I'm just having a conversation with Krista. Now in the background, release managers and developers have probably built a conversation in Krista to go do a couple things. They're going to go kick off builds in Jenkins. They'll look for the QA tests to run and give us statuses back. Okay, so I can see the Jenkins has started the daily web build. It was build number 85. Okay, we prepared, we built, we tested. And so, yeah, sometimes unit tests fail. It doesn't really bother me. I'm going to go on and push to deploy. So I'll have Krista know, she knows which build to kick off in the background. She's still doing it in Jenkins. I'll give you a sneak peek. If I come over here and I refresh and type in my password twice, you'll see here, she kicked off this build. So she's actually working with and collaborating with these tools themselves, right? So she's actually just orchestrating those things on the background for me. So this was pushed out. Now, the other thing that Krista did is she actually notified some other people. I can see in my DevOps channel here, if I come over here, I'll say go to conversations. I have 2 unread messages. So Krista has actually notified me as a person as part of the process. Okay, start builds has been kicked off. And it says, please run your tests and give us a go, no go. So this is where Krista is bridging the gap between those two lines of the subway. And so let's see, run functional tests. So I'm going to run them in QA Lab 1. Great. So if you think about it, how many times are you alt tabbing between different tools to figure out what do I run? Where are they running? Let's kick off the functional tests. Now, notice I've got a timer here also. So the thing is, Krista to push this out to multiple people. This BRA guy, he's an InfoSec, so he's gotten the same messages where he needs to go figure out what's going on. So I have a conversation, I've run my tests, let me go look at my results. I'll put them in text so it's easier to read versus JSON, because we all know people love reading JSON. But yep, we had 40 tests, only one failure. Looks like it was a bad label. Doesn't bother me. Chris said, remember, do your go, no go. So I'm gonna say this is a go. And I can tell, for documentation, I'll tell you what I did. Ran test in lab 1, worked well. And my timer's kicking off. So I've done this within my allotment before I get escalated and ask someone else to do the work, and it's completed. So I've actually interacted between two people. In this window, I am in QA, so I'm actually running my tests and validating. I'm a participant in the go, no go decision. So I've orchestrated a human. On this side, I'm actually back to my release manager, and I can see these two people have said, yep, and we can say, I was do a chart here. Yep, everybody said 100% it's a go. Do you want to do the deployment? So I'll say yes, we'll deploy. And now for simplicity, I made myself the VP of engineering also. So I'll go in and take this approval process. So the VP is now notified. He gets the same type of information. Here's the people who've given the go, no go. Do you want to know the status? And so maybe he says, okay, there's different things he can do. He can get history reports to release board. So I'll kick a conversation off directly versus doing the natural language processing, so you can see how that works. So notice, I just asked the technology information. The technology knew how to go get the test results for this release, because it's what we're doing now. It's in scope. Obviously, we're in an active release. I can see, yep, things look like they're passing quite a bit. Makes me happy. So I didn't have to go alt tab over, learn another place. I don't really care as a VP where they're putting the test results. I just care that I can get access to them easily. So I'll say, let's deploy this to UAT, and this will then in turn notify our business partners that, hey, we're pushing to UAT and go from there. So what was really interesting here is I didn't actually have to go alt tab into, say, Jenkins and Jira and different tools and look at things. The technology understood my questions. The technology got the information for me. So it's a pretty big shift. Instead of giving someone, say, the run book automation of alt tab here, alt tab there, go get this, go get that. So this example was very much person in the middle. Now, what happens when we get past levels 3 and get to that high levels of automation because we're using Krista? So in this case, what I'm going to show you is it's all about getting the right information to the right people. Krista can kick off the builds. Krista can watch for exceptions. So we want to manage by exception. I don't need to know everything. It's not like I need us to read the Slack chatter where there's 150 messages there. I just want to know very specific things. How did the go, no-go decisions go? And then I'm going to release. So I'll manage more by exception. I'm still going to put people in the middle for approvals, but I don't want to burden them with all of the data. So in this case, I'm just say automated DevOps. I'm going to say, let's go build the mobile app. So what we'll notice here is this is just start kicking off, and multiple steps of the process will happen in the background, and then I'll get notified as they're completed. So I'm not getting inundated with too much information. I'm getting inundated with the right information. So it's like that mobile app built, build number 2. The pull, the build, the unit test, submit, code analysis, all looks good. So that all passed. So got a nice summary. I didn't have to go into another tool to find that. And so it looks like that app was actually deployed into the next environment as build 79, so it looks good. And looks like it's done. Okay, so looks like everything's done. I can see the go, no-go responses from multiple people here. If I look over here, these guys in the test were actually, they had notifications for what was going on over here too, so they understood what was going on, but their tests were kicked off for them. Probably a little logic said, if the test pass, don't bother me. They fail, let me know. So what do I need to do? So I need to actually understand, okay, these guys look, they say it's great. Okay, do I trust them? I don't know. What's the release status? So this is what John said. Most people say, nah, it's okay. Yeah, how's the release going? Yeah, it's fine, probably. Well, quite honestly, a manager may or may not know where to go find that, right? So why not give them a discrete conversation, ask that and get a response back? And so there's my release status. Oh, yep. Warnings, opens messages done. So that's cool. So I don't have to worry about finding out what's wrong, what's right. I can actually have a conversation and get actual facts and answers. So it looks like John had a question. Or nope.
No, I'm good. Did it show raise hand? That was my mistake. I was just gonna crack a joke, which you already made for us.
Yeah. So the idea is we can actually make this as automated as you need it to be, but we want to include humans in the process. And so the first one was very heavy, and the second one was very light. The trick is the value of orchestration is the key to higher levels of maturity. We're orchestrating humans, the release managers, and Jenkins, the build processes. Humans that are included in the workflow with timers and escalations. So nothing gets left out or stalls. Why does DevOps stall? Because someone violated the password in an email. They're not getting emails for half a day, so they didn't realize they had stuff to do. People do go on vacation. So when your DevOps processes is Zooms and emails and trying to get people together, they stop because of those things.
And Chris, we've heard this more and more, and it's even true in our case early on when we were a big Slack user or very early in our own development. It's hundreds of messages fly through Slack. One of those is super important to me knowing that something happened so that I can continue the process. God forbid I miss that one message. So I'm spending countless hours, hands off keyboard as a developer, searching for value in the messages in Slack. And of course, it's so dangerous to say, hey guys, we just put it all in Slack, because it becomes a dumping ground for, it's now everyone's job to figure out if there's information they need to know. It's exactly the opposite of what you want. What you actually want is for people to be proactively pulled into and informed of things that are important to them. What we've done instead, because we don't have the good tech that orchestrates the way that you, Chris, just said, instead we're just dumping everything somewhere and basically making it their fault that they can't keep up with that and deliver on their deliverables. So I find that the reaction to, wait a minute, don't we already reorchestrate with Slack, is, well, sort of. You make the human have the problem. We need tech to sign up for that problem. If tech signs up for the problem of pulling people in, orchestrating people into the system and getting the automation triggered based on what people are saying, you have a much more effective outcome. So you're saying it beautifully, Chris, but I just wanted to remind people that we're all experiencing the same journey, right? Chris said at the beginning, we're all on the same journey. We've seen it ourselves. Slack gets overwhelmed, and we're picking on Slack. It's not really picking. We like Slack. It's just whatever you're using for the dev team to message each other just becomes a huge mess when it's actually somewhat important stuff and unimportant stuff and critical stuff, right?
Yep. So and one of the limitations that we have is actually aggregating information across multiple systems. Slack's really good at this. One thing happened, one thing happened, one thing happened. And then, you have to go log into multiple tools to figure it out. Where, someone like a VP just wants a status that's extracted from those different systems. So the orchestration, touching the systems, knowing how to ask a question or reply a response back. And then the neat thing is I built these, and I'm not a Java coder. This is actually built code free, And I didn't have to go ask development to put a bunch of junk on the backlog to do it. I actually asked for requests of information for a system, requests to do build, requests to kick off tests, and then I get things back. So the nice thing is each actor can have a conversation with Krista versus being trained on 17 different systems. So if the release manager is not available or someone in QA is not available, they're gonna have a huge training manual. Well, this is how you run these tests. This is how you go to this system. This is how you do that. Because those are part of a conversation with Krista, we don't have to go train 50 people on that. Someone can step in when they need to. And just to reiterate, so if we started out with the story, if we want to get past the neutral zone, get past level 2 to level 3, 4, and 5, the key is orchestration. Messaging platforms are going to get you to level 2 quite well because you're notifying people, you're expressing that automation's happening, but they're very siloed, right? And they can work against you. The more people you have, the more messages, it's a fire hose. And in reality, we always can collaborate really well within the small teams. Developers who are doing Get and Jenkins together are great, but the DBAs are in a completely different part of the org. They're closer to infrastructure. You've got QA, you've got testing, you've got app services, right? Cross, a messaging channel, say in Teams or Slack or Chat or whatever, is not really well suited when you have to broadcast it to 7 different roles in the organization. The best of both worlds is messaging, say, have Krista as a plugin to Slack so developers can use Slack to message. That's great because that's what they're used to. They don't have to go into a different app. But behind the scenes, it can actually cross over and have conversations with very specific parties like database people, QA people, and they're different things. Maybe they're using Chatter. Maybe they're using the Krista app to do their communications. You can actually bridge the gaps between them because we have plugins, okay? Conversations are providing notifications and provide the orchestrated actions across multiple systems and roles. That's really the nirvana we want to get to, because if we want to get all of those tool chains working together, we know some things the businesses want to do. Maybe they use the Krista app to kick off, get statuses. Developers may stay in their messaging tools, but it has to be the orchestration of people and systems together and have it well audited, and so we understand what's going on, and positive escalations and things like that. So that's what we were prepared, Scott. So
super. Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. It was really informative. I learned something new every time, so I appreciate it. But we have a couple of questions that have come in, and we'll just go ahead and read those out for the benefit of the audience. If you were not the one that actually typed the question, if you have a question, keep them coming. But we previously answered a question from Martin about Krista gets smarter as time passes by and data is collected. John, any thoughts on whether or not Krista gets smarter or not smarter?
Yeah. So the key here is that Krista has the ability to get smarter in several dimensions. There's the process itself dimension. And then, of course, there's the data that's being transferred back and forth between the systems and the people that are being orchestrated together. So in both of those areas, Krista can learn and become better. And then even in very tactical ways, like we describe certain things differently. I call it a build, you call it a make. You're old school, right? So we can so even in simple ways around NLP, there's a lot of learning and self-reflectiveness in the product. So I think you'll find that very interesting.
Then that kind of goes into another question about ambiguous requests, or maybe a question that Krista isn't already prepared to answer. How would we deal with that? Because if I'm used to working in Slack, I'm sending it to a person, like I'm collaborating with a person that probably understands what I mean. And on the onset, Krista may not understand, what I mean if I'm asking a question that isn't one of the common ones. How would we, advise in that scenario?
Yeah. So the fundamental approach that we take is people who understand the process can describe that process as a conversation between their people and their systems. We don't want them to have to be programmers in order to implement that process. We just need them to be able to describe it as I ask people for things, I ask systems for things, right? So those are actually predetermined and captured in a studio user interface, not the user interface you just saw Chris showing you, but in a design time environment where the folks who understand the process that needs to be carried out, whether it's DevOps or anything, HR, supply chain, whatever area you're applying Krista, you have the ability to define a process or an outcome you're trying to achieve through this conversational notion. The effectiveness of that, I'll start with this, the hardcore answer, and then I'll dress it up a little bit. The hardcore answer is that's only as good as the author of that process. If it's a complete mess, then Krista will go faithfully carry out a complete mess. But in time, Krista will capture the feedback and the awareness of the fact that these conversations are being abandoned, that the responses weren't correct. And authors are getting this feedback, by the way, through Krista on those conversations, and the proper repairs can be made. So basically the Krista is not all knowing, right, with regard to how your processes need to function, but is easy to build and very easy to modify. Because in fact, that's the most important part. What we found is automation fails on maintenance. It fails on maintenance. Because what you find out is as soon as you try to deploy a piece of automation, you realize all the things you didn't automate yet. You find out all the boundary conditions you didn't support yet. Well, Krista is very, very fast at making those changes or enabling you to make those changes to be more accurate. And that's an important part of it.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck is, people that run automation, or if they're running an RPA tool, they understand how those are coded. But then the conversation thing, sometimes it's kind of lost on them, which would indicate that may be the case here with the questions, but it's a good question because that means, they were paying attention.
Right.
So that's good. So another question, I know, John, that you were talking about Slack a lot in the collaboration tools. We use Teams or G Suite or Chatter or email or Slack. Is this another collaboration tool? Like, is this replacing? Is it a combination of? So, how does Krista work if you're already monitoring several different channels, of communication?
Right. So we don't want to put yet another messaging inbox on you, right? We already have too many of them. Look at everybody's phone. I've got 5 apps on my springboard to message folks, right? It's good. We're going nuts here, which is why we actually try to integrate into existing collaboration tools instead of becoming one ourselves. But here would be I think the most important message that I could give you here is our goal is to reduce the amount of message traffic you have to keep up with. Krista needs to be a member of the team and tell you what you need to know, not basically make you have to go figure out, oh, wait, what if there's some channel with some message that I need to know? It's got to be the other way around. The tech has to sign up for getting you involved instead of you having to basically have the anxious worry of keeping up with all that message traffic. So if you're already heavily using a collaboration tool, we'll integrate to that. If you're not, we can be that, but we're just as happy if you use another. The most important part, reiterating, is it's no longer necessary for you to watch the dev channel or a particular project channel and read countless messages that have nothing to do with what you're trying to accomplish in order to make sure, because the process now involves you proactively. And I think that will be a net massive savings in time and net increase in productivity for everybody involved.
Okay.
And Chris, feel free to take the next one, Chris, because somehow I'm the Q&A.
Chris, this probably goes back to, we didn't see the actual authoring studio, but John talked about it a second ago. We got a question. This is it's always one that I enjoy. How long does this take? Like, I wish someone asked how much it costs too, but so how long does it take? And obviously that depends, but kind of guide us through that.
So it was actually amazingly short. So the idea is we have a business catalog of requests that are out there. So when I looked at the DevOps processes, there was already a request called kick off a build and get build status pre-built. So all I had to do was know how to connect Krista to my Jenkins instance. So little OAuth tokens and all the goodness. So that was about 10 minutes. And then I could immediately use the request, kick off a build by typing in a name. So for me, so when I started, these are some of the first things I did. So let's say I was with the company for 3 weeks. I'd actually never been to a Krista training class. I figured out how to build these conversations and communicate against multiple roles in a couple hours. So the idea is this is the hard lift of how do I connect to the system and get the information as part of the connectors and the extensions. The developers do the hard part. My goal is just to build a conversation. Well, what do I want this to do? I want it to kick off a build, and I want to ask QA and InfoSec to do their work. And then I want to build a timer to come back and join those. And I could say, does everybody have to answer or single person answer? So it was literally a matter of hours for me to build this demo because the hard parts were in the business catalog for me. Now, of course, there's extension capabilities there. So if you know how to do a little bit of Java and you have a new request that doesn't exist, we will then drop onto the file system the actual source code of where you, with the holes, where you say, here's your methods, go implement these are your implementers, drop your code here, compile and upload. And the compile and upload is an easy process. It compiles, it's an automatic upload and deploys into the cloud infrastructure. So literally, I spent a couple hours building this because my core DevOps processes were there. There was one part I needed extension. That was I, as a business person, made the request. I said, this is the data I want. This is a response I'm expecting. The impl was then done by a second person very easily.
And Chris, the follow-on question to kind of highlight that would be, all right, you kicked off 2 different automated test projects as a part of one of these. What if there was now a third? How many minutes or hours or days would it take for you to update your existing automation to support that third?
So that's literally minutes. So that's literally add another choose one, or I could put in what's called an entity model and actually put it, Chris will store it for me. You can add an entity and they dynamically reflect. So 2 easy ways to do it. One is actually say, here's another choice. That's a couple minutes. The nice thing is SDLC is built in. So I say, take a copy of production. It brings it into the pre-production environment into draft mode. I make my edit. I move it to test. I verify. I then promote it to production. There is role-based security, so not everybody can move anything to production, but that whole life cycle is actually built into the tooling itself. So you don't have to worry about, do I need to copy a jar? How do I do this, right? That's actually all built in and actually auto deploys into the infrastructure for you. So it's minutes to make those kind of updates.
So Chris, you're a pretty experienced guy and your domain knowledge is there. So would it be that easy for everybody, or, how far down the line can you push this?
So in my picture, I showed you, there's only a handful of actions in Krista, right? So literally everything comes down to programming. The programming, if you will, is ask a system for information. There's a request that gets the information for you. You have a step called inform a person, make a decision. So it's not like you're going to learn 45 different things. Of course, there's a loop in there and that, but it's a very small vocabulary because you don't need a whole bunch of vocabulary to do these, have a conversation. You need to ask people for systems, inform, make decisions, and then sometimes you have timers in the background say, remind me in 4 hours or in 2 weeks to do this, or for loop. So this is not like learning a programming language. This is like talking about having a conversation in the context of time. So it's very simple. So Scott, I bet I could teach you how to do it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So, and then, I think the last question we have is from our friend Andy. Expand on the orchestration and maybe security and compliance. So as you do all these things, ask a system, inform a user, user, clicks a button or moves a slider to give a go, no go. Like what happens in the background? And then maybe if I am a compliance manager, or in finance or something like that, like what am I reading? Like, is this automated? Does this help me? Does it make my compliance easier? What happens?
So compliance, every time you go through a compliance audit, say a SOC or CPFR 21 Part 11 audit, the fact you have automation to set your guardrails makes those audits easier. And the fact that we're logging everything in the background and have a reporting engine on top of it, so you can say, what was the release back in May of 2019? What did it look like? What were the decisions? What was the data? So all that is historically there. Now, the neat thing is, based on your role, when you make a request for information, say it's something like you're in a HIPAA compliancy or where you're worried about people information. So build information systems, who cares? But maybe it's like you're accessing personnel records and company records. So you have certain things are sensitive, like a person's phone number, but a company's phone number is not sensitive. So per request, for each element of data that goes in and out, there's actually built-in role-based accessibility. So you can say managers can see this type of information, call center people can't see this information. So part of Krista's security model itself is not only who can run conversations, who can deploy them, but for specific requests, what information is private, what information can be seen by everyone, and there's actually roles on top of that. So this is probably some of the coolest intelligent automation that you're ever going to see. And it's because we've learned so much in the past, building automations and integrations, that we've gone through and got all the check boxes in place. So John, if there's anything else you want to add to that?
No. In fact, I think that is a good way to summarize it. A lot of the folks in a DevOps webinar like this one will know that there's you do this long enough, you see that the common problem is the black holes. We automate all the bits, but we don't know how to assemble it together. We don't know how to pull people involved. We don't know how to properly status things to executives who have no idea what the tools are, and you can't get them there. There's information overload. There's too many tactical things. Back to what Chris said, we're alt tabbing between 50 different things in a day, 1,100 times in order to make. It's an overwhelming amount of complexity. We essentially believe that we're helping assemble the parts, produce a consumable output, and put it in the hands of the right people. And yes, that definitely includes properly our role-based security controls around both actions and data that anyone is visible to. And of course, the full audit helps, because we had a customer over a year ago now say, we miss releases when we send an email to InfoSec that it's ready and they don't respond, because my guys don't push the deploy button until they get an email back from InfoSec. But if InfoSec never sends the email, we never deploy. So I get come down on, this is literally what I'm hearing from this customer. They come down on me saying, why did you miss our release? And I said, because my guys didn't get an email. Well, that's just we can't work that way. So instead, orchestrating people and the tech together creates a very seamless, managed, and audited process. That same customer said, we burn 100 hours of labor every time the audit committee says, can you prove you followed our privacy policies? Or can you prove you followed our requirement maturization process? They had this process for their financial and regulated institution. So they had this different process they had to go through with it. Before it could be given to dev, they had a whole set of check boxes that had to be signed off that everybody's okay with doing that particular change. Can you prove you signed up that happened? Well, they said they'd burn 100 hours digging through emails and asking people to remember and will you verify that I sent you a text that blah blah blah. Can you remember that we passed in the hallway and that I asked you if it was okay? And it's just a ridiculous effort. So this really is a solution to problems very much like that.
All right. Well, thanks, John. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for everybody for sticking around our Q&A session. Hope it was informative. If you have a question, obviously go to the website and type in, let us know who you are through our contact form, or follow us and comment on social media. We will surely answer your question as soon as we can. But thanks again, guys, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.